Okay. Great question. Great question. We have another one in the back.
I have a complicated question, and mainly because I don't fully understand it even myself. I worked for an association for 12 years. Okay, they had a pension fund, which they don't offer anymore to new employees, and they haven't for a while. There was a period of time where they have to reach some level where you can actually, being labeled a highly compensated employee, I wasn't allowed to take any money out. I've just turned 62 this month. They've now reached the level where I could actually take a lump sum of the money, obviously with a penalty. With being wary about if that fund could, it could go away, right? How do I determine whether to take a lump sum now that it's flush, if you will, with the penalty versus sitting back and waiting?
Well, my question would be, can you take the lump sum and just roll it into an IRA? That's what a lot of, if I'm understanding the question correctly,
yes.
It's a pension program that's built up a lump sum that you could leave in there, and it might get a little interest rate in the meantime, or you could take the lump sum, pay a penalty or pay taxes on it, and spend it, or you can usually roll that to an IRA and continue the tax deferral and not pay any penalty, and invest it in whatever you want. And that a lot of times is going to be the better route to take, unless you need to spend the money in the next, 3, 4, 5 years. And I can talk with you further one-off about that as well.
That was my thought, that was that very thing of having it roll over into, I don't know if you roll into my SEP, if you will, or...
You can do that. Your plan should allow that. I haven't seen many that don't.
Okay.
Yep.
Great question. All right. Let me just have one. I think, again, you touched on it, but just are there any other strategies you can think of to supplement that pension or Social Security income? I think, you had some great suggestions. So I want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
It's not as complicated as it used to be. And it's funny that pension is kind of a dying breed. The government's the only, seems like just about the only institution that's keeping the pension around, and who knows what's going to happen down the road. So it's nice, but one of the questions prior to this was, what other mistakes have I seen people make? Another mistake that I've seen people make is thinking that pension and Social Security income is going to be enough for retirement, and that's a big misconception. Because pension and Social Security together, even if you qualify for the max, if you're trying to recreate the lifestyle that you've been living your whole career, it's not going to make you whole. So you're going to have some sort of supplemental income. More often than not, unless you're paring down your financial situation pretty big time. So TSP supplementation, that's the reason why the TSP plan exists in the first place, and that's the reason why they started giving FERS employees a match on your contributions to the TSP. The CSRS system, where they have a big pension, is everybody familiar with the CSRS, where you have a bigger pension? Well, they don't give you a match on your TSP plan on contributions if you're a CSRS employee. So it's kind of a sign. You need to have some supplemental income.
Perfect. No, that's great advice. So, anything you want to add, Alicia?
No, he hit on anything I could think of. So.
Perfect. Well, that's good. That's good. We'll move right along then. So, now we're at our midway pop quiz. See how well you guys have been listening. So, in your folder, you're welcome to get it out or just say true or false. It's going to be a quick true or false game. We're going to say a few questions. So, just want to see what you guys have learned so far. So, first question. You will not need as much income in retirement as you have now. True or false? So the falses are correct. Beautiful. So, yep.
Yeah, well, there's a supplement to each one of these true-false questions. It's kind of an asterisk to qualify your answer, right?
No
it's,
problem.
unless you pare down your financial situation, right? It's just an assumption that's somehow been ingrained into our society that you're going to spend less in retirement, and a lot of times we actually find the opposite is true. You start spending more because now you have an extra 40 hours a week to figure out how to spend money.
That's an excellent point.
starts looking pretty good. Vacations, you have time for that.
Right? That is a good point. All right, so we're gonna move to the next one.
I have one thing to add.
Please do, please do.
You know, one thing that we run into in our practice is, you know, you think you need less, you know, you maybe already have your house, you got your clothes, you got your car, oh, I'm not gonna need this. And then comes in your chronic condition with your health care. So if you have a stroke, or lots of people having dementia, you know, early onset, anything like that, you never really planned on that. And then with all the care that's going to require, we know how much the healthcare costs, and that's going to make a big, big difference. So that's just one thing that, you know, if you live a nice, healthy life and this doesn't happen, then you're very lucky, and that's, you know, we wish that for all of you. But there's a, you know, if you develop a chronic condition, then that's a real problem for your being able to afford the care.
No, that's a really good point. That's something a lot of people don't think about, so glad you pointed that out. Thank you. So, next question. When I retire, I will need to dramatically shift my investment portfolio from stocks to bonds. True or false? I think we touched on that at the very beginning. Oh, you're such good listeners. I see it. You can tell them higher. You got the falses. Yes, and so this is a little more to it, but yes, false is the overall.
Yeah, so to qualify that, the best thing about my job as a financial advisor is that the answer to every question is it depends.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly.
So, yes, there's typically going to be some sort of shift because now you're taking money from your retirement accounts, but we need to plan for the growth longer term that you may need. So if you're going to live 30 years in retirement, we're going to have something that's still in growth assets, growth types of funds. Or we can save more or spend less or retire later, and then we can get around the growth aspect of it, right? And those are your options. Those are the things you can control, right? So, yeah.
All right, we're actually going to go ahead and move on to the next section. We want to make sure we stay on track and get everyone out in a good time. So we're going to jump to insurance and retirement. So let's dive right in. When do I sign up for Medicare?
Well, there's a
Where we're going.
There's a window of time. You have a 7-month period of time to sign up for Medicare to get the best deal on it. Is anybody familiar with the age 65 rule, where you have 3 months before you turn 65, and then you have the month that you turn 65, and then the 3 months after you turn age 65, so for a total of a 7-month period of time to apply for Medicare. And if you don't do it during that window of time and you apply for it later, they're going to charge you an extra fee that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. So,
unless you're working.
What's that?
Unless you're working.
Unless you're working. And you may know a little bit more about those rules than I do with your line of work, but
Say it again. 3 months before, 3 months after.
3 months before the month that you turn age 65, and then 3 months after the month you turn age 65.
Is this if you're not working?
This is if you're not working, right?
And if you do miss the window, as he was saying, there's going to be, your premiums are going to increase, so it's going to be.
Why? Why is that?
It's to dissuade people from signing up for Medicare late.
And when they're sick.
Right, if they're sick. Like, if you put that off till you're 70 and so you're beginning to have health problems, you pay a penalty because you should have been paying the whole time. There's 65 till
It's because it's a guaranteed issue. You're guaranteed to have access to Medicare if you apply for it, right? And so if you cherry pick and you wait until you're sick, now you haven't paid in premiums that other people have, and you're going to get a benefit. You're guaranteed to get a benefit. So, yeah, it's a way to protect the supplementing of that program.
But if I'm working when I'm 65, then when would I do it? Think I'm still.
I don't know offhand, so, but we can check that out.
No worries.
You can do it later.
Okay.
What you do is you sign, if you have an employee eligible plan, you don't get the penalty if you sign up later, and once you retire from the job, then you can sign up for Medicare without penalty,
Okay.
as long as you have insurance.
Okay. No, that's great to know. I didn't know that. So thank you. Appreciate that. All right, next question. How do I decide if I need long-term care insurance? And honestly, this is my first time hearing this phrase, so if you can explain what it is, that would be great.
Does everybody in here know what long-term care insurance is? what
Maybe
it
it's
covers?
just me, but.
It's how they robbed us blind.
What's that?
That's how they rob you blind.
Oh, no, they already
It's
did.
definitely,
Oh,
it's
the premium
definitely our
hikes.
next bubbles, right? That and, college tuition, right? Well, anyway, long-term care insurance is gonna cover, expenses if you ever needed chronic care. If you ever need to go to a nursing home or you needed in-home care, for that matter, or an assisted living, type of facility. You know, we have to be able to do activities, particular activities each day to live. And so, there are 6 activities of daily living, feeding yourself, clothing yourself, toileting, things like that. If you can't do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, then you can qualify for making a claim on your long-term care policy. And so whatever kind of help that you need to receive to be able to do those things that you can't do for yourself anymore, your long-term care policy will pay out a benefit for that, up to whatever the benefit that your long-term care plan pays for. The problem is, and this is something that Alicia's firm takes care of a lot for their clients, is that it's so expensive that it's hard to afford a long-term care policy in the first place that provides much coverage. And even a long-term care policy that provides a lot of coverage sometimes doesn't even cover half of what it actually costs. It's $15,000 to $20,000 a month to be in a decent facility around this area anyway. And sometimes it's not even including add-ons like a $15 daily aspirin that they'll charge you for. So long-term care insurance is important, but I like the term long-term care planning, or just planning a strategy that you're going to employ if you ever faced a long-term care situation. Sometimes it's a combination of having a little bit of long-term care coverage and other strategies to protect assets from having to spend them if you were to be faced with a chronic care situation. So.
Great. A lot of our families, the children call it their inheritance insurance, so that instead of, having to private pay for this very expensive monthly health care for skilled nursing care particularly, the long-term care insurance can kick in after Medicare stops paying, which the length that Medicare will pay just depends on certain clinical criteria and whatnot. So once Medicare stops paying for that kind of skilled nursing care, you really have 3 options. Private paying, just you're using up your assets, which can really deplete your assets quickly. And you can have your long-term care insurance kick in, and most of the policies will, for long-term care insurance, will provide for in-home care too. You just want to make sure that maybe a policy, if that's definitely what you want, which is what most people want, you want to check that out. And the third option is, instead of private paying, and if you didn't have long-term care insurance, because a lot of times the long-term care insurance, the premiums are really disproportionate to someone's income or ability to do that. You can, try to do some asset protection planning, and that's just one thing that law firms do, Medicaid asset protection, where you can structure things and apply for Medicaid to get Medicaid to kick in to pay for some of the long-term care costs. Medicaid is asset-based, so you just can't own very much in order to qualify. So there's strategies that can help, and then ideally preserve some of the wealth that you've worked your whole life to save all this money. You don't have to just expend it in a few months in a nursing home or something.
Then you have to have less than $2,000 to $5,000 in assets, depending on what state you live in.
Depending on what
qualify
state, each state has their own specifics, but it really is a very low number, so you have to do some definite planning. And with Medicaid, there's, when you apply for Medicaid, there's a 5-year look-back window. So you have to take that into consideration. So if you have, even during that look-back period, even if you applied for Medicaid and you had, gifted out some of your assets or did things, you can still save, you know, at least 40% of your nurse insurance would cover anything during that period. So there's all sorts of strategies, but it's just very expensive in this area, and if, you know, it's worth doing some planning if you have a friend or loved one in that situation.
So the recurring theme is to plan ahead, right? So
Plan ahead.
before it ever happens, have a plan for what you're gonna do, because you can't just all of a sudden run into the situation and give your money to your best friend and qualify for Medicaid. It doesn't work that way. The government's smarter than that. And it's not the government stingy, it's just they need to stay in business. They need to continue to be able to fund this program. Right? So,
Speaking of planning, oh, sorry, any questions?
Does this go by state? Let's say like I need long-term care, okay. Can I move to another state where there's relatives and they take care of me, it's cheaper, or it doesn't work that way? Or does it get complicated where you have to, does it go by state?
the cost of care.
Yeah, like, you said it's cheaper, so
Yep.
I get sick, I can't afford care. But I have a relative, let's
Oh, yeah.
say, I don't know, Alabama or something, I don't know.
Mhm.
You know,
That's a good example.
can I do that? Can I move to Alabama and to reduce?
Sure.
Absolutely.
And if you ended up living with a relative that's providing a lot of the care, definitely get a care agreement in place, because a lot of times that person will, you know, if you're not paying them, they might be expecting something in your will or something, and it's good to sort of clear that up front. Or sometimes what happens is there's been one primary caregiver in the family, so the sick person maybe says, I'm gonna change my will and leave them this or whatever, because, you know, they've done all this for me, but the other family members didn't know that they weren't going to inherit anything or whatnot. So it's just good to like make some kind of agreement or plan, and then everything flows, you know, then you can leave your
Like I can be
base.
like a single person, no children, but have a lot of sisters, no siblings. No siblings and one
And if
might
you-
live in Alabama. Like,
If you
can
do
Yeah.
end up at any kind of facility, especially skilled nursing or assisted living, it's always good to do your research too. There's lots of publications that rate the areas, because a lot of these pop-up ones, you're not really sure if they're financially sound, and you might lose your deposit or whatever. So, you know, just to do your research before you commit to one.
One more quick question, we need to jump to the last section, we're running out of time.
Real quick on that long-term care, I had an aunt that got it, it lasted 3 years. Does that vary from company to government and company to company or states? She mentioned 5 years.
Even within the same company. So
Okay.
depending on, it just depends on what plan you
What plan you
choose.
get?
Yeah, there used to be a lot of lifetime benefit options out there. Those aren't so common anymore. If you have a long-term care insurance policy through the government, you've probably seen your long-term care premiums go up like crazy lately, maybe even doubled within the past 6 months or so. And the reason for that is we're now realizing that this is a big problem. This is really expensive now. A lot of baby boomers are about to make claims here. And so they're raising rates, and the awesome deluxe insurance policies of yesterday, like with John Hancock back in the late 90s, those just don't exist anymore. So it just depends on what plan you choose.
And a quick follow-up, what's the best way? Go with the government, you know, it costs more, or the company? Because what if the company goes belly up, and what's their responsibility?
Well, so the government requires insurance companies to keep a heck of a lot in reserves now. There are laws that prevent, they're aimed at preventing insurance companies from going out of business, so it's not gonna be as likely as you might think. You're gonna have more bells and whistles on a non-government long-term care policy. And now the cost between the government's long-term care policies and the individual insurance companies, the cost difference is getting smaller and smaller. And so there's some other benefits that would take probably longer than we have here to go through, we can talk about further, but.
Yeah, you can always set up appointments or calls with either of these people afterwards, which would be great. So, great questions though. So we're just gonna dive into our final section, estate planning. So that's a very important topic. But we'll get to it, and then we'll do questions. How should I arrange my estate to save on taxes? So if you want to take this, Alicia, since it's your
Sure.
specialty.
Well, the good thing is with federal estate tax taxes over the last few years. Things have gotten better for us taxpayers as far as owing any federal estate tax. Although I do kind of wish we all had a federal estate tax problem, because each individual right now has $5.49 million to pass on federal estate tax free. So that means, you know, at your passing, you've got $5.49 million. There would not be any estate tax if you passed it to your spouse anyway. There's an estate tax marital deduction. So a lot of people don't need to do any, you know, tax planning in their estate plans. They're not going to be at that limit. The problems arise in the District of Columbia here, if anyone's a resident of the district or owns valuable property in the district. DC has its own estate tax. It's a $2 million exemption per person. Just went up to $2 million this January, so that's a big improvement because it's been $1 million for quite a few years. So we've all been waiting. Come on. So in the district, if you have over $2 million in estate tax, you may be subject to DC estate tax. The rates are not quite as high as federal estate tax rates, but you can still do estate planning to save on the DC estate tax and federal estate tax if needed. And a similar thing is in Maryland. Maryland has its own estate tax and an inheritance tax on certain beneficiaries. In Maryland, this year, you can each pass on up to $3 million estate tax free. So Maryland keeps increasing. By 2019, it'll be equal with the federal amount at almost $6 million each person. DC should also be increasing its exemption, but it's not set in stone yet. But it's looking better for the next few years.
That's
So,
good.
yeah, that's good. So the basic way that any of the estate tax planning works is primarily, if you're married, it's great because you can set up, whether it's in a will or a revocable trust that you've probably heard of too, you can set up estate tax planning where, let's say a couple owns, you know, $4 million as a couple in DC. And they haven't done any planning. So when the first spouse dies, now they didn't have to owe any estate tax at their death because they passed it off to their spouse, marital deduction, no problem. But now when that second spouse passes, they've got $4 million because they inherited everything that two of them owned. So when that surviving spouse passes, you're $2 million above the DC limit. And then there's going to be DC estate tax on that overage. So the basic idea would be, instead of doing it that way, when the first spouse passes, they don't leave everything outright to the surviving spouse. Their documents say, hey, hold it in trust for my spouse to use during his or her lifetime. They can use it for whatever they need, really. Health, education, maintenance, and support. That's kind of the magic language that is a little bit limited. So they'll get all the income from the first spouse's estate, any principal they need for health, education, maintenance, and support. And they can take a little on top of that as well, like 5% of the principal or $5,000 a year. And so when the first spouse died, they left it in a trust for the survivor, who can just use it. Now when the survivor dies, they might die with their original $2 million that they own. But what their first spouse left them, since it wasn't to them 100%, it's not in their own estate when they die. So the first spouse didn't owe any estate tax. Second spouse doesn't owe any estate tax. So that's kind of the basic idea of how the tax planning trusts work. So if you do, you know, have an estate in the DC or Maryland or federal that's going to be taxable, you definitely want to take advantage of the estate tax planning. And if you're a single person, you don't have a spouse to do that with, there's just, you know, if you need to reduce your estate so that you don't have estate taxes, if a lot of your assets are like in life insurance, like a lot of people have a large life insurance policy, there's a special kind of trust you can set up that will move the life insurance proceeds out of your estate. It's just basically setting up what's called an irrevocable life insurance trust. And there's other types of irrevocable trusts you can set up as well. And irrevocable trusts, of course, once you set them up, you are going to relinquish incidents of ownership so that it's out of your estate. So if you are a single person, so you don't have a spouse to take advantage of the marital deduction, you can just think of some other ways to move assets out of your estate if needed, or start spending your money.
Vacation.
You can make, gifts, in the $14,000 annual gift tax exclusion, so you can just start gifting out to donees if you start chipping away like that.
Well, speaking of that, because you were talking about trust so much, I'm actually going to skip a question for a second, come back to it. Do you recommend that I do set up a trust? Like I know you listed it a lot if you have a lot of wealth and assets. Say I don't have a lot of wealth and assets, I've already took all my vacations, about that, I have no money left. Do you recommend I still do a trust, or is it just for the people with lots of assets, or?
There's a couple different kinds of trusts. I think what you're talking about is like sort of you hear about this revocable trust. Revocable, however you want to say it. Then that is primarily, we use it for the estate tax planning and also for probate avoidance, which means the probate process is when you pass away, and you might have done this for a friend or relative, when you pass away and somebody has to take your will down to the probate office and file it, and for a year, 18 months, sometimes even longer, they have to file what you owned at your death, and then accountings as to what you did with, what they did with all that. So you're getting receipts for everything and showing what you did with the assets. It's just kind of an administrative process. It can be a big headache because it's just a lot of filings with the court. So some people want to make it, on their death, make it easier for whoever's taking over their estate. So if they have set up a revocable trust, the main idea is to rename assets into that trust. Like if you have your revocable trust set up and you own real property, you would literally do a new deed from you yourself to you yourself as trustee of your revocable trust. And then you still own it. You can do anything you can with it as an individual if the trust is set up correctly. It's very flexible. But at your passing, since your trust owned it, you as a resident of whatever county or the district, you didn't own the real property, that doesn't need to go to probate. So if you set up a revocable trust, the whole idea is to get assets into it instead of in your own individual name. So you would do your real property, bank accounts, and then certain other accounts, it's asset by asset. Things like IRAs, TSP accounts don't go into your trust during your lifetime. Those are handled differently for tax reasons. But if you do a trust, you will get instructions about all that kind of stuff. But that's a probate avoidance technique. If you want to make it easier on the people handling your estate at your death, it's easy to do. And it's also good for your incapacity planning. Because if you have a bank account, you set up your trust during your lifetime, you name your Wells Fargo account into the trust. If you become incapacitated, you're in a nursing home, and your son or daughter needs to take over your care, go through your mail, pay your bills, and pay the hospital bills. If they are listed as the successor trustee, they can just start writing checks on the account as the successor trustee once you're incapacitated. So, it's good for your lifetime too, but one big advantage is that probate avoidance upon your death.
Oh, that's fantastic. Are there any other ways you can avoid the probate?
You can also, if you pass away and one of your assets, any of your assets, had a surviving joint owner with rights of survivorship, like if you own real property with a spouse, or as joint owners with rights of survivorship, not tenants in common, that's different. So if any property that you own at your death where there is a surviving joint owner with rights of survivorship, that surviving joint owner just owns it by operation of law. Nothing needs to be done with it. So that's another way. assets that have pay on death beneficiary designations, like your bank accounts, your thrift savings plans, IRAs, your thrift savings plans, IRAs. If you have people listed on those accounts, it goes to those people. You know, it doesn't end up in probate. So, and then some of the other ways, I think it's brokerage accounts and things, or stocks to transfer on death accounts, but same idea.
That's what I was gonna ask about, is that, so even for like checking and savings accounts, so you can do joint WROS, joint with rights of survivorship, that'll avoid probate.
That's right,
Right.
yeah.
So if your checking account with your spouse or whoever it is doesn't say WROS after it says joint, then you might wanna look into that. And also, if you're an individual and just have a checking or savings account, you should have a TOD form, a transfer on death form filed.
Right, make sure you have like a pay on death form or transfer on death form. The institutions use various names, but that will avoid probate. So anything like that, you know, the main idea is to either have things titled in your revocable trust to avoid probate, have a surviving joint owner, or have a pay on death beneficiary. And there's, speaking of trust, like with your pay on death beneficiaries, a lot of times you can set up, it can be set up within a revocable trust or even within a will. If you have a beneficiary that's going to be a minor child, you've probably heard of things like children's trusts. You know, if you're leaving something to a niece or nephew and they're 6 years old, you can, you know, make provisions in your will that it's to be held in a little trust for them till they reach a mature age, and somebody's administering the funds for them for whatever they need. And then you can set out ages where you might want them to start getting lump sums of it, you know, maybe ending at age 35 when they're hopefully mature and working.
Fingers crossed.
You can set up, so that's like a little sub-trust that you would set up for a beneficiary, either in your will or within your revocable trust. The same is true for if you had a person that you were leaving something to that you wanted to protect it from spouses, like in divorce or something. If you have a child that is married and you're not thinking the marriage is going real well, and you really want to protect her from divorce, you can, instead of letting your child or whatever beneficiary it is, inherit that outright. And then if they start commingling it or do things with it, it could be subject to, you know, be marital property upon a divorce. If you hold it in the trust for them during their lifetime, where they can have access to it for whatever they need, but it's protected, that also helps protect from some lawsuits and things. And if you have a special needs beneficiary, somebody that's already on government entitlements, and again, like Medicaid, that's asset-based, if they inherit something, they could just actually disqualify them immediately, and they would have to start the whole process all over again to qualify. Or even if it's a disabled beneficiary, a younger child or something that's already on entitlements, you want to leave stuff to them not outright that could disqualify them, but in a special needs trust that says what it's to be used for. So it's still used for them, but there's restrictions that are intentionally designed that they won't get disqualified. And the real fun stuff, I have to add one more.
Jordan, one more.
You can set up a little trust like that just for, you know, to encourage certain behaviors in certain beneficiaries. So that's always a fun one. You can be creative as you want. But, you know, most people use that for, you know, get so much when you graduate from high school or college or do this or that. As long as, you know, you can make it as specific as you want. But, you know, you can be restrictive too when they're doing other behaviors that you anticipated and you're not allowed to.
Just to play jokes beyond the grave, right? Just mess with people
That's
after
right.
you're dead.
Well, perfect. Well, we are almost out of time, so I want to go ahead and wrap it up and have to let our speakers do some closing comments. And also thank you guys for coming. So we're going to let them do some closing comments, but like I said, they are going to be here for a few minutes, so please stick around and ask some more questions if you had. I just want to respect everyone's time. We just have to go. So any closing comments from you guys?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up in just a minute or two here, but you all have an evaluation form in the folders that you all have. If you could do us a favor and fill out an evaluation you have in the folder.
Now you get one.
Here's an extra.
I think that needs one.
There you go. And here you go. When I was
Throw it there.
love it.
So,
Oh, thank you.
the evaluation forms, what we'd really like most is for you to fill those out, give us some feedback on how you felt about the evening. Whether it's things to change, other things to talk about, or if you really got a lot out of it, please just let us know. Another thing on that evaluation form is you obviously will have the opportunity to tell us whether or not you would like us to follow up with you and talk further about your specific situation. And what that looks like is us just setting a meeting to talk about your particular financial needs and financial goals, giving you some on-the-spot feedback, and providing you with a complimentary evaluation and analysis on your, whether it's retirement situation or any other financial goals. We will literally help run a financial analysis on your situation, complimentary to you, just for having that initial meeting with us. So there's no obligation, no commitment involved, but I would encourage you all to take that opportunity to at least see our process, and that's it. So.
And I think we ran out of folders, but I believe we're going to email the documents to everyone who attended, so just make sure we have that you signed in on your way in, and we'll make sure to email you everything that was in the folder. So, yeah, any other last comments before we wrap?
And I would say it's like, the estate planning is not just, if you're so wealthy and rich that you need all this, but, anytime you need to, you want to have a say in who gets your stuff, who's in charge, in what manner they get their stuff, then that, you should consider doing a will or a revocable trust, whichever one you decide you need. But you can set forth again, who's to get it, so you're not leaving it to chance. And very importantly, is to get powers of attorney in place too. In general, you want a financial power of attorney. It's called a durable general power of attorney. And that's just somebody that can step in, make financial transactions for you if you're incapacitated, or even in some cases unavailable if you're traveling overseas and you get stuck for a few weeks and need someone to handle something for you. And a medical power of attorney and medical directive, which should be like oftentimes in one document. But again, if you can't make your own medical decisions, this person can step in for you. And it has your end of life decisions in there too. If you're in a certain persistent vegetative state or whatnot, do you want to be on life support? How long do you want to be on life support? And so you're not burdening people with having to make those decisions for you. But if you have the powers of attorney in place, it will also help avoid a guardianship proceeding if you find yourself incapacitated and unable to handle your own affairs, and then people have to go hire attorneys and do a guardianship proceeding in court, which is very expensive and also public record.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. And again, please stick around if you have any questions. And our next seminar will be next month on the 26th on auto buying. We do this the fourth Wednesday of every month. So, yeah. So if you have questions,